Hello, and welcome back to Turnaround Politics. Today, we will be looking at the Democrat primary race up in Massachusetts for their senator. It's a race between challenger Joe Kennedy III and incumbent Ed Markey. Let's start off with looking at Joe Kennedy III. He is the son of U.S. Representative Joseph P. Kennedy II, grandson of U.S. Senator and former U.S. Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, and grandnephew of former President John F. Kennedy and U.S. Senator Ted Kennedy, and great-grandson of U.S. Ambassador to the United Kingdom Joseph P. Kennedy Sr. A lot of talking. He is from a very historical family, the Kennedy dynasty, having a president, attorney general, a U.S. senator, two U.S. senators, multiple U.S. representatives. Is a family that has a long standing in U.S. politics, and definitely will be seeing Joe Kennedy VI before long running for office. So let's move on to Ed Markey. Ed Markey is not much younger than the dynasty as a whole of the Kennedys. His first held office was in 1973. It was the not the U.S., but the Massachusetts House of Representatives for 3 years until he won election to the U.S. House of Representatives for Massachusetts 7th Congressional District. He served there until 2013 for a special election, and he won the U.S. Senate special election in Massachusetts, then won re-election in 2014. He's been in politics for a long time. He is the second longest serving politician combined if you combine his U.S. House of Representatives and his Senate tenure. Very long serving, but even though he has been serving for a long time, he's a very progressive politician that has focuses on climate change and energy policy, and he lines up and he co-authored the Green New Deal. Well, in 2019, after 2018 elections, the House Democrat leadership warned that it would cut off any firms that challenge incumbents. However, they did say House Democrats, but many took it to mean that they would cut off any business from firms that would help any Democrat primary challengers. However, come to find out in 2020 for this election, that rule was loose depending on how Democrat leadership felt the candidates were. We see that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi endorsed Joe Kennedy, along with Representative Castro from Texas, Representative John Lewis from Georgia, rest in peace, Representative Pocan from Wisconsin, and very high-profile U.S. representative right now in Adam Schiff. While on the other hand, Ed Markey has been getting endorsements from more progressive candidates, like Elizabeth Warren, as we see up there, more progressive Democrat person who also ran for president. U.S. Representative AOC, very progressive from New York. Nadler and Maloney, all from New York. And Rowe from California. And also former presidential candidate Tom Steyer, former Vice President Al Gore. He's also got many organizations, Working Families Party, Move On Political Action, and Democrat Senatorial Campaign Committee, which is pretty much who endorses incumbents. However, you would think the committee that would endorse incumbents would have Nancy Pelosi on their side, but I just think Nancy Pelosi decided this election they would go for a more moderate candidate, less left, more moderate, help with elections, be stronger to the party, unlike Ed Markey, who is a very firm believer in progressive policies. Now let's move on to funding if it loads. There it goes. Joe Kennedy in this election has spent about $11.5 million, but he's raised only $8.6 million. That can be a lot of different things. He could have spent his own money. He is from a very rich family. They've had a U.S. president in the last 100 years. They've had multiple senators. They definitely have millions of dollars to spend on a campaign. If you were to go and look at their family's net worth, it would probably be well over $1 billion. However, he does get most of his campaign money from large individuals' contributions. Sorry, I can't speak for some reason. He gets 82% of his donations from large individual contributions. That high of a number is kind of shocking. However, having high numbers in that kind of way is not super shocking. Small individual contributions is less than $1 million, which just the amount of money raised in this election for a primary Senate race in Massachusetts, and not just a primary race where there's already an established Democrat incumbent, is very weird and very rare to see so much money raised for a primary challenger. This mostly stems from the fact that early on polling favored him quite a bit. We see that he has PAC contributions of about $500,000, includes contributions from other candidates' committees, which means that if Nancy Pelosi really went down to it, her money raised for her campaign this year, because she's in the U.S. House, has to run every 2 years, but very safe district. Any money she raised, she can go spread the wealth around as she pleases. And that means that he can be getting donations from a lot of people that support him in the House of Representatives or U.S. Senators if they feel like they want to get Ed Markey out. And then there's this other. We could do more investigation, but it is a very low number, and it's not something we should be looking at. If the other was very high, we probably should be looking at it, but with less than 2%, $165,000, there's no need. Now let's look at Ed Markey. He is also a very rich man. He's been in politics for a long time. He's probably saved money and is going to be very wealthy. But he doesn't probably spend his money on elections. So far, he's raised $11.6 million, which is, let me say, I'm not mistaken, Joe Kennedy's raised $8.7. So Ed Markey's outraising him about $3 million, and he spent $10.3 versus Kennedy's $11.4. While he also still has $3 million cash on hand, he probably has put money into his campaign, but he's leaving it there. It's kind of probably what he's going to do just in case he needs to spend money right at the end. These numbers were last reported 8/12, so there's been about 20 days. So now let's look down at his contributions. 60% of his contributions do come from large individual contributions, which still high number. We would like to see in a perfect world lower, but to be considered large, it has to be greater than $200, so that's not a substantial amount of money. You'd rather see a low PAC contributions. Both of them have very low PAC contributions. However, that can be very deceiving because PACs and super PACs can spend money on ads without talking to the candidates about the ads, which means that they don't have to report those as contributions or spending for the candidate, so they would not pop up anywhere on here. We'd have to go to another part of Open Secrets, but I have another tab for that, and I want to get to that later. But he does have more small individual contributions, way more money than Joe Kennedy does from it, and a bigger percentage, leading to the belief that Ed Markey's campaign is more funded by himself. Or not by himself, but by the people rather than a few large donors. He does have more PAC contributions, which is kind of worrisome with him being such a progressive and previously has decided not to take super PAC money or certain PACs money, but he decided not to in this race. Joe Kennedy's called him out on that, but we will see the outcome in the election if people support that or not. Now let's move on to this. There's a little part in this article for Politico I wanted to go. I highlighted it. The new leadership PAC, which is organized by Kennedy's twin brother and other family members, political dynasty, has spent over $4 million in support and airing ads attacking Markey, while United for Massachusetts pro-Markey Super PAC. The difference between those two is very substantial between a PAC and a Super PAC. I'll do a video about the difference between PACs and Super PACs later on, but more people are worried about Super PACs because we don't know more of the money behind Super PACs. They could be one single really rich billionaire deciding to run a Super PAC, and they don't have to, it doesn't matter how much money they individually put into it. And they dumped $3.3 million into the race on behalf of Markey. This means, by saying on behalf of these candidates, neither of these candidates have to take campaign finances for that. They don't have to put it on their things when they send it to the people that keep track of finances, make sure there's no funny business happening. And so all this money is outside of what I've shown you so far, showing that this race easily has spent more than $20 million between these two people in a primary race with an established incumbent. Now let's get down to the nitty-gritty. This is where, if it loads, Real Clear Politics polling. Real Clear Politics, I love to use it. It brings all the polls into one place. I don't have to search a whole bunch. And so let's start off at the top. Every single one of these are the most recent ones. The oldest one on here is 7/31, which is July 31st. Actually, not that long. Polling for president is not even as good as this sometimes. So let's look. It currently has Markey at 11.2. That also includes older polling data, because if it was just this, I think it would be higher. But all of this showing that Ed Markey is leading substantially. Let's scroll on down to all the polling data and see why Joe Kennedy decided to run at first. The first polling data was done last August 23rd by Change Research. Sorry for that. It had Kennedy leading Markey by plus 17. If I was a politician and I saw that kind of lead for a U.S. Senate race, my dream position, there'd be no way in the world that I wouldn't run for it. And it easily shows why he ran. Even the margin of error, it's well within outside the margin of error. People were really supporting him last year at the same time. But later and later, it just kept going down for Kennedy. The last poll having him up was done in May. And then there was more polling done in July, showing a substantial switch in polling that people believed Markey would win. Markey is currently leading the spread by 11.2, and this is combined of all this data. However, let's look at the margin of error. One of the more important things, 7, 4.1, 4.44, 4.6, and it's well within the spread, the closest being Markey plus 7, with it being a 4.0 margin of error, which means that lead could be as low as 3. So all these have Markey winning the election. However, he will be winning with early voting. More people have decided to vote for him early, people suspect, including Joe Kennedy. What's really going to come down for this election for Joe Kennedy, if it loads, is voter turnout. Higher voter turnout is really going to benefit Joe Kennedy, because they're going to have to be facing early voting, mail-in voting, absentee ballots, all that kind of stuff in favor of Ed Markey. So Joe Kennedy really needs to get people out over the next month, or the next couple days. He needs to get people out Tuesday. But over the last few weeks, he's been trying to get people to send in ballots and mail-in voting and stuff like that. He's went on the record and saying how weird it is that every day over a couple months is considered an election day for him. But I believe that this election, let's go back to Real Clear Politics, is not going to be within. The average has 52 for Markey, 40.8 for Kennedy. There's probably 3 or 4 or 5 more candidates that take like 1 or 2%, showing this kind of lead. Only showing data of 92%. However, I think this is more going to come out to be like maybe more like 50 to 44, 51 to 46, depend on how well the other candidates do. But I think it's going to be they're going to have within 6% of each other. That's what I'm going to call this election. We'll see if I'm right come Tuesday night. Wednesday morning, Senate primary elections aren't counted as fast as November 3rd will be. But if I'm right, it's going to be for Ed Markey, between 48 to 52. It's 4 points. That's quite big. I'll close it down. I'm going to say 49 to 51. And for Joe Kennedy, I still think he's going to get at least 44% of the vote. Don't think he'll win, but it will be interesting to see. Thank you for watching, and you guys have a great rest of your day. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, and follow me on Twitter. I put out questions. I'll alert you guys to when I post new videos. Interact with me. You guys have a great day. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.